Which conspiracy theory is so believable that it might be true? That your phone's microphone is constantly hot and it's listening for keywords to target advertising. Most glaring instance where this happened to me was when I walked into a colleague's office. He had just gotten a standing desk, but one that goes on top of his existing desk rather than a standalone model. That's important to note. I said nice standing desk. When did you get that? Thanks, just today. He replied. That was literally all that was said about the desk. We talked about work related stuff, and as I walked out and checked my phone, there was an ad on Facebook for that exact model of standing desk. I have never owned one, wanted one, or googled one before. Yet there it was on my feed. Tinfoil hat be damned, they listen in. My conspiracy theory, Facebook purposely attempts to ruin people's relationships because the drama gets more views and more views sell more ads. Several years ago they introduced a feature so that your comments on other pages would show up in your friends' feeds. So if you're secretly an atheist and you comment on some atheist page, it shows up in your devout Southern Baptist Grandma Muriel's timeline, even though it's a conversation that has nothing to do with her and there's no reason for it to be. As a result, Facebook outs you to your family, and grandma is typing away at all the evil satanists trying to corrupt her grandson. And if you comment on a public post, it's unavoidable. You used to be able to control who could see your comments even on public posts by other pages, but at the same time Facebook introduced their tattletale feature, they took that ability away. Now if they were to stumble across the same page they'd be able to see your comment, but after that change, Facebook started pointing everybody you know directly to it. Not to mention, the privacy settings are difficult to find, difficult to understand, and with each passing year gives you less and less control over who sees what. By forcibly combining everybody's social circles, Facebook is trying to generate conflict. They want to generate conflict because the conflict happens on Facebook, which means people logging onto Facebook more often and seeing more ads. They're essentially an internet tabloid, except instead of showcasing the personal drama of celebrities for clicks and sales, they're doing it to you instead. Ever notice how the vast majority of family drama, relationship fights, etc. these days happens on Facebook? That's by design. Facebook is literally destroying the social fabric to make a buck, consuming relationship stability like it's an oil refinery consuming crude. That there are hundreds of companies that operate tens of thousands of Reddit accounts each. They have been auto-rigging these accounts for years, use scripts to auto-post and comment, and have humans that shift through all the accounts to make various comments to maintain these accounts. These companies have the ability to control and game their way to the front of Reddit. Huge brands use them, special interest groups use them, political parties use them. It's not a conspiracy, it's a real thing. That William Shakespeare never wrote any of the works that have been attributed to him. I don't think I believe the theory 100%, but the lack of evidence to support him as a writer is amusing. William Shakespeare was born, lived, and died in a small town that consisted of not much more than sheep farmers. His father made sheepskin gloves. Certainly not the life that would have contributed to the knowledge of the many royal topics of Shakespeare's works. Surely the true author of Shakespeare's works would have had the means to travel and learn of all the worldly topics that his works were based on. We do know that he did own the Globe Theatre and that he did work there as an actor. There is no record of his attendance at any schools. He was raised in an illiterate household. Both of his parents signed all legal documents with a mark, a sign of illiteracy. There are 6 surviving signatures of Shakespeare. All of them look as if a 4-year-old wrote them. They were almost assuredly written by an illiterate person. All of the signatures were found on documents such as a mortgage contract and his will. There are no surviving original written literary works written by Shakespeare. There are no surviving personal letters written by him. Surely a letter written from Shakespeare would be coveted as prized possession, surely destined to survive to the present day. Mozart's handwritten letters professing his desire to poop on his cousin's face have survived to this present day, but not a single letter written by William Shakespeare. The only surviving written documents, written in his hand, were his will, and few other small pieces. All pieces of his writing that have been found were all written in secretary hand, a very basic form of writing. typically used by poorly educated people. There are no surviving official documents that recall him as being a writer in any way. All official documents state that he was a businessman and a real estate owner. Shakespeare's will made no mention of any assets related to writings, books, or anything of that nature. All these facts paint a picture of a scenario where someone paid William Shakespeare to use him as a pseudonym for their own writings, and perhaps used his position as the owner of a theatre as their own personal venue. The best theory about the true authorship was Edward de Vere, 17th Earl of Oxford. He was well known to be a gifted poet and playwright. He was also known to sponsor companies of actors, and he was a patron of some of the most well-known theatres. Oxford would not have been at liberty to write about the topics found in Shakespeare's works. The only compelling evidence that I've heard from Shakespeare supporters are anecdotes written years after his death by people who knew Shakespeare and referring to him as a writer. I don't find this compelling at all. If Shakespeare made an arrangement to act as the author of someone else's works, surely such an arrangement would require Shakespeare lie to everyone. I'm certain that all his friends thought he was a writer. I have long argued to friends and family that Barack Obama may have been a CIA operative sometime in between college and being a community organizer in Chicago. Bear with me. After graduating from Columbia in 1983, Obama went to work for a company called Business International Corporation, a company that is known to have been used as a CIA front in the past. There is little information available about this time in Obama's life. The CIA was actively recruiting at that point in history and would have been very interested in a young black man with an Ivy League education and ties to Indonesia and Africa. The information would most likely still be classified, but it could also have helped his rapid accession in politics at such a young age. After nursing this theory for a while, I finally googled it, and, sure enough, loads of websites tout similar theories. Some of it convincing. Not the stuff about him being a CIA crony nor to fought Russians on the moon. That angle is less convincing. The Laurel Canyon Conspiracy. Basically, if you look at the counterculture revolutionaries in the music industry in the 60s, most of them were the children of military intelligence people. So the theory is that the free love, lots of drugs movement they inspired was done intentionally to distract the youth from a full-scale revolution. The thought was, if the angry youth of the mid to late 60s were too high and getting laid all the time, they would stop caring as much about societal ills and then basically sleepwalk through the 70s, which they did. I stumbled upon this when I was reading up on Jim Morrison and how his father was the one who called in the fake strike at the Gulf of Tonkin that kicked off the Vietnam War and which was shown later to have been a false flag. Turns out, a lot of his contemporaries were also children of highly placed military people with ties to intelligence. Strange that they all wound up in Laurel Canyon as part of the same movement. What the authorities say, Mick Jagger is simply an iconic rock and roll star and nothing more. The song TikTok, as performed by K$HA, was written by a guy named Benny Blanco. Its lyrics include the line "We kick them to the curb, unless they look like Mick Jagger." That's a little bit strange, right? Mick Jagger wasn't exactly at the height of his attractiveness when the piece in question came out. Stranger still, it wasn't the only popular song to paint the man in a pleasant light. Moves Like Jagger, performed by Maroon 5, was released at around the same time, and Benny Blanco also had a hand in writing that one. This is where things start to get creepy. The song The Time, Dirty Bit, as performed by the Black Eyed Peas, features the following phrase: "All these girls, they like my swagger, they calling me Mick Jagger, I be rolling like a stone." It was written by John D. Nicola, who used to produce the music for a band called Kara's Flowers, although you might know them better by their current name of Maroon 5. The song Heart and Soul, as performed by the Jonas Brothers, contains a verse that ends with "making mistakes, but that won't matter if you can swag like old Mick Jagger." Antonina Armato wrote the piece, and she is managed by Downtown Music Publishing. Care to guess who else they manage? Here's a hint, it rhymes with Balloon Hive. This web of connections extends all throughout the recording industry, but one thing remains unclear. What's the link back to Mick Jagger himself? There must be something, because if you have a look at Google Trends, you'll see that his popularity spiked with the release of each song. The only time in recent memory when it has been higher is during a period in March of 2014 when his girlfriend died. Some people have suggested that the man's name is just easy to rhyme with swagger, but popular usage of the word in reference to something other than a walking gait came about after the aforementioned songs had hit the airwaves. In other words, Jagger prompted swagger, not the other way around. Why does there seem to be a cabal of artists trying to artificially inflate the performer's appeal and popularity? What benefit is there in promoting an aging rock star? Who is actually behind this odd trend? In order to answer those questions, we need to turn to Vivendi. This is a company which owns a lot of stuff. Their subsidiaries include Dailymotion, Ubisoft, Gameloft, and the Universal Music Group. The Rolling Stones signed to Universal Music in 2008. In 2010, all of the songs listed above were released. Look at those Google Trends again. 2008 marked Mick Jagger's lowest ever dip in popularity, and the slump continued until February of 2010, right after TikTok became the most popular song on the radio. In September of that same year, the Rolling Stones re-released their Egg concert movie, securing the #1 spot on 4 different countries' charts, the US and the UK being 2 of them, 2nd place on 4 more, and a double platinum certification in Canada. Strangely enough, though, the only other place, besides the United States, where platinum status was achieved was in France, which is where Vivendi is located. What if all of this was carefully planned and executed? What if there's a shadowy organization that's intent on promoting Mick Jagger for their own profit? What if I made all of this up on a whim and just found whatever tenuous evidence I could to support it? I don't know if it's a conspiracy theory at this point, but a lot of people still don't acknowledge that your internet searches and social media profiles are absolutely being used as training models by major rig companies. I was a drunk college student and had access to them to run AI training. If you still think you're off the grid, you're an idiot. Being frank, it's not a big deal. If you don't have dark shit to hide, those people are too busy building the new technological world to give a shit that you look at midget porn. But don't delude yourself to think people don't have access to anything you do on the internet. That research of thorium as a safer nuclear power source was suppressed in favor of uranium research due to uranium's ability to be weaponized. Edit on my lunch break and see that this kinda blew up. A lot of good information in the comments. I'm not a physicist or an engineer. My field is environmental studies, so safer, cleaner energy is important to me. That being said, I obviously have not researched this topic enough. It just seems to pop up in conspiracy topics often. See YouTube. Looks like a good discussion. I'll have to read through it all after work. The Titanic/Olympic conspiracy. It has credibility because there is photographic evidence. It's really one of the only conspiracy theories I put much belief in. The sister ships and their third counterpart, the Britannic, were owned by White Star Line. The Olympic was put into service in June 1911. She collided with another ship, the HMS Hawke, in September of 1911 and both ships were badly damaged. The accident was a financial disaster for White Star Line, as they were found to be liable for the accident and had to pay for the damages to both ships and legal fees for court cases associated with the accident. Repairs on the Olympic took nearly 2 months and parts intended for the Titanic, which was still being built during this time, had to be given to the Olympic instead. Only a few weeks after being returned to service, the Olympic suffered another minor incident where one of the propellers broke off, and pieces intended for the Titanic were once again cannibalized. At this point, the Olympic was looking like more and more of a money drain for the White Star Line, though its achievement in not actually sinking despite a major accident that should have sunk it cemented the Olympic class liner's reputation as unsinkable, but I'll get back to that in a moment. The Titanic was finally finished and ready to leave port on her maiden voyage on April 10, 1912, having been delayed while new parts were made and delivered to replace the ones needed for the Olympic, and from there we all know the story. She went first to France, and then to Ireland, and then began her trek across the Atlantic to New York, during which she struck an iceberg, and after nearly 2 hours, sank, taking 1,500 souls with her to a cold, watery grave that would not be seen again by human eyes for nearly 100 years. The Olympic went on to have a 24-year career as a successful ocean liner. She served during World War I, where she earned the nickname Old Reliable for her impenetrable hull, and then in 1919 she was re-outfitted to be a civilian passenger ship and served as an ocean liner until 1935, when she was retired from the fleet. Her ownership changed hands several times, and she was eventually dismantled and sold for scrap metal. But what if it wasn't the Titanic that sank? What if it was actually the Olympic? What if it was a ploy to remove a faulty ship that was costing them more money than she was bringing in for White Star Line and cash in on her £1 million insurance policy? So here is the conspiracy theory. At some point after the Titanic was completed, they switched the identities of the ships. The new Titanic was actually the Olympic, and the Olympic was actually the brand spanking new Titanic, fresh from the construction yard with zero problems and zero history. They intended for the Titanic to suffer some sort of failure that would result in the destruction of the problem ship, so they could collect the insurance money. I doubt they intended to also cause the deaths of 1,500 people. The events that transpired which led to the sinking of the Titanic possibly happened purely by chance, and the iceberg wasn't part of their plan. That is, they didn't hire the captain to specifically ram the iceberg to sink the ship or anything like that. They probably had another plan involving the repairs that had already been made on the ship when it collided with the HMS Hawke. In any case, it wasn't really the Titanic that left port on April 10, 1912, it was the Olympic. After the sinking of the Titanic, White Star Line received a tidy sum of £1 million in insurance money, or £89,289,575 in today's money. This, of course, ruined the insurer, Lloyd's of London. There's an additional conspiracy theory that American financier and banker JP Morgan was in on this whole scheme. His company, JP Morgan & Co., financed the International Mercantile Marine Company in the hopes of becoming rich off of sea travel, but this turned out to be a bad investment because of the unpredictable nature of sea travel and travelers themselves. JP Morgan or one of his associates may have schemed with White Star Line, who was a subsidiary of this IMMC, in order to bankrupt the IMMC and allow JP Morgan & Co. to withdraw from the IMMC without breaking a contract. I cannot provide evidence for this beyond speculation. However, I can provide evidence that backs up my claim that the two ships were switched, and it was the Olympic who sank, not the Titanic. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more daily videos.